Well, this will be part one of a series called Blinded by Chivalry. Blinded by Chivalry. Pastor Dalrock wrote a really good article entitled Blinded by Chivalry, where he says some have written that one of the beautiful things that the Puritans did was to enshrine chivalry into marriage. But what the Puritans really did was to take this ideal, keep the romantic and chivalric aspects of it, and then combine it with faithful and monogamous marriage. Because we know what I've talked about at length now is that chivalry and courtly love was rooted in adultery, where the knight of the round table or wherever the knight came from would try to pursue a romantic relationship with a noble woman who was the wife of some kind of lord or whatever, is where the tradition really came from. And he says, Pastor Dalrock says, it's also true that the Puritans tried to reconcile the idea of courtly love or chivalry with biblical marriage. So they're trying to combine these two. That's the legacy, and the Puritans did a lot of awesome stuff, but they also gave us this. He says, but it's not true that in the process of incorporating chivalry into marriage, that the Puritans somehow improved on the biblical view of marriage. He's saying, no, that's not true that they improved on biblical marriage by combining this idea of chivalry and romantic love into it. He says, while the Puritans removed the most obvious problem with chivalry and courtly love, which is the overt worship of adultery, they still greatly corrupted the idea of biblical marriage in the process. Chivalry is philosophical cancer, meaning if you understand the ideas behind chivalry, it's bad. It is anti-biblical to really adopt chivalry into your thinking. He also says it is the mechanism that transformed the feminist complaining into concrete action. Now, I've done a video on that criticizing Chris Williams when he talked about how feminism rejects chivalry. And no, it actually, philosophically, feminism has to have chivalry to make it go forward and survive. So you can take a look at that video too. He says, even without the overt encouragement of adultery, chivalry is, again, anti-biblical. Chivalry teaches that women are inherently moral. That's not what the Bible teaches, but chivalry teaches that. And then he goes to C.S. Lewis again. C.S. Lewis does a fantastic job of writing about this in The Allegory of Love, his book. And he says that the lady, by her social and feudal position, is already the arbitress of manners and the scourge of villainy, even before she is loved. And he says, biblical marriage is antithetical to the kind of wife worship that chivalry demands. This involves associating both women and their feelings of romantic love with virtue and the divine. Even C.S. Lewis explains biblical marriage is anti-chivalry because of male headship and because it is based on commitment instead of emotion, meaning biblical marriage is based on commitment, not on the emotions of romantic love. C.S. Lewis writes, the love which is to be the source of all that is beautiful in life and manners must be the reward freely given by the lady, and only our superiors can reward us. But a wife is not a superior in biblical marriage. He says, how can a woman whose duty is to obey you be the maidens, or the object of desire, whose grace is the goal of all striving, and whose displeasure is the restraining influence upon all uncourtly vices? Now, we can kind of see that in the way that marriage is talked about in the average evangelical church, I think. Now, maybe I'm crazy, but I think that's true. I think that's true because we have been blinded by chivalry. blinded by chivalry. C.S. Lewis also goes on to say, where marriage does not depend upon the free will of the married, any theory which takes love for a noble form of experience, I think he's meaning romantic love, must be a theory of adultery. And so Pastor Dalrock comments that it's only by doing great violence to biblical marriage that modern Christians can practice marital chivalry. And then he goes on to list some examples. So when I go into part 2 and part 3, I'll talk about the examples of how in the modern day church, even by very conservative pastors, we again are blinded by chivalry. Blinded by chivalry. And we got to get this corrected. I think I'm going to write a book about this, actually. I think this is so good, I'm going to write a book on this topic. Because we got to get this correct. Even with all that, though, Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Postmillennial Man.